Well, good good morning, everybody. It is great to be here on a Sunday again, and I'm just going to grab my water. Excuse me for a second. And to welcome everybody here on our Sunday, we'd like to bring forward this this help that we can provide to those who need, and that could be anybody. That it is called the Fss Fraternal Assistance. So, if you're feeling down, if you need somebody to talk to, especially during the pandemic and isolation, it's really good that we look after our mental health. And so the Fraternal Assistance is a great assistance, is a great tool that we can utilize, that we can talk to somebody and ask for advice, and with that give a little bit of time into our mental health and hopefully improve our mindset. And like I said, this is open to anybody and everybody, and you can just contact us through our media channels or through the welcoming@fsscalgary.ca email, or reach out to anybody from FSS, and we'll take care of you. We'll look after you. I'm having some issues with Facebook here, so yeah, that was the note that I wanted to bring to you guys before we start. And today we're just to get us going, I will read a text from the book The Way, the Truth, and the Life by Emmanuel through the medium Francisco Cândido Xavier, and it's a great book. It has I don't know how many, but roughly 180 chapters. So small little short texts that are great, and they are interpretations from Emmanuel around the gospel. And I didn't have a text today, and I opened on the last one, 180, and the title is "Let Us Shine Our Light." And it's a passage from Jesus in Matthew in chapter 5. For those of you who don't remember, chapter 5 is the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. When Jesus said, "So let your light shine among men." And Emmanuel brings to us the reflection that in comparison with the glory of the evolved world, the sublime spheres that fill the universe, the narrow area in which we live is certainly a limited circle of action. But if it were merely a matter of physical space, we would have nothing to complain about. The small, humble house, joyfully illuminated by the sun, is a paradise of happiness. The anguish on our plane comes from darkness. Darkness has invaded every path in every direction. Darkness born from ignorance, wickedness, foolishness, enveloping nations, institutions, and individuals. A fog that assails consciences, minds, and sentiments. In the midst of this long night, we need to kindle our light. Otherwise, it is impossible to find the way to freedom. Without the shining radiations from our being, we cannot be seen very easily by the divine messengers who lend aid in the name of the Almighty. Nor can we effectively help anyone, whoever that might be. It is indispensable to organize our inner sanctuary and illuminate it so that the darkness does not overcome us. It is possible to progress by using other people's lights, but without our own, we are in constant danger of stumbling. The owners of the lighted lamps may go a different way than ours, summoned by lofty mountains that we do not yet deserve. Therefore, take advantage of the sources of light along the way. Use the wick of goodwill, the oil of service and humility, and kindle your torch for the journey ahead. Thank those who light your way for an hour, for a few days, or for many years. But do not neglect your own lamp if you do not want to slide off the road and down a cliff. The fundamental issue of redemption, my friend, is not limited to spoken or written words. It is very easy to make wonderful speeches and give excellent information while remaining blind ourselves. Our basic need is our light, our inner enlightenment, our self-education, and the real conversion of the self to the kingdom of God. You can speak marvelously about life. You can argue brilliantly about the faith. You can teach the values of belief and eat the bread of consolation. You can exalt peace, gather the flowers of the good, and enjoy the fruits of other people's generosity. You can win ephemeral crown of easy praise and accumulate various titles that adorn you as you traverse the valleys of the world. All this, in fact, be done by the Spirit that tarries indefinitely on certain spots along the way. However, it is impossible to advance without light. So let us close our eyes in this moment and bow our heads, if you wish. And elevating our thoughts to Jesus, our Master, our Guide, the one who came and shone his light and still shines his light constantly for us. And Jesus, with you here today, we ask that you inspire all of us on our time together, that we can strengthen our communion with God, that we can strengthen our communion with our own selves, and in that find that light that we all are, as you so blissfully told us, that we are the light among men. And as Emmanuel brought to us, let our inner light shine, as it is impossible to evolve without it. God, may we find our light as we progress through our evolution on earth. May that be today, tomorrow, or any time soon. Thank you for allowing us to be here today, and may we be blessed by your love, your warmth, and your kindness. And so be it. So thank you all for joining us. It is always a great pleasure to be here, and we will be talking today about Jesus as it brings us tremendous joy to talk about this topic, to talk about this man who not only came to earth to teach us about love, but to show us how to build, construct love, how to act with love, how to walk with love, how to hug with love, how to look at people with love and compassion, and most importantly, how to look at our own selves with love and compassion. And this talk is titled Learning to Love with Jesus, and it's a talk that we created back in 2019 for Christmas. and I gave it again in 2020 for Christmas, and I'm giving it again this year, because we're entering December, and it is the month where we embark on Christmas, the Christmas spirit. So first I'd like to say hello to Soninha, Danilo, Anna. Thank you for joining us today, and we invite you all to share your thoughts, questions. We are looking through here on YouTube, and this talk was inspired by many books. You can probably not even read here, but there's the Gospel of Matthew, Letters of Paul, the Spirit's book, a book from Joanna de Angelis called The Conscientious Being. Also from Alírio de Sequeira Filho, we have a book called Mental Energy and Self-Healing. And the book, one of my favorite books, called The Good News by Francisco Cândido Xavier. And we actually have 2 fresh new copies here at our bookstore if you would like to get it. The Good News is a book that has roughly 30 or 32 chapters, I believe, and they're roughly 5 pages each. It's a great book to read a story before bed, or even in your gospel at home, and they are extensions of the gospel, and they Humberto de Campos, who's the spirit who authored this, writes it in such a warm and subtle way that we can, it's almost as if we were there with Jesus and he was teaching us. There's no need for pull up a dictionary or to try to interpret, because the words are very straightforward, so it can easily touch our hearts as you read a passage, as you read a sentence. So we wanted to start by reflecting a little bit about why Jesus, right? Why is he the one that, for example, in December we think about? Why is Jesus the one that we're talking about here today? Why is Jesus the one we usually start every single talk with and end every single talk with? What made him so important to us? As the Spirit's book brings us, he is our model and our guide. And I think this answer might be different to every single one of us, because I believe Jesus has touched us in different ways. Jesus has touched us in different moments in our lives, in different intensities, and for some it might have been you might have been at a really low point and Jesus showed you the light in that moment, or it might have been something of a progression. It was a small little increments of light throughout a year or throughout 2 years, and now you see yourself in communion with Jesus, and how he can constantly bring us inspiration. Now, inspiration around what? What did Jesus bring to us that was so important? And I love this picture from this kid. You can see how euphoric he is, how happy he is. It's as if he's like, oh, now I get it. Now I understand Jesus. Now I understand why he came here. Now I understand what he provides to us back then and until today. And the answer for me, and I believe to many of us, is around love. He came here to teach us about the divine laws, to invite us to reflect about the old way and how we can improve our lives with love and start behaving in a new way. Not only did he come to show us or to teach us about love, but he constantly lived it. And as I said earlier today, he taught us love in every single aspect of life, because he was living love. Every single thing he did, every single encounter he did, was an example of pure love. It could have been the way that he looked at somebody. It could have been the way that he hugged somebody. It could have been the way that he was observing, especially his apostles, interact with themselves. Or it could have been the way that he was so faithfully and so disciplined, praying to God in every single step. Right? And that comes to show us that even though he was the greatest man to step on earth, he still prayed every single day. So that brings us the humility that Jesus had as well. Not only was he the greatest man, but by knowing that he was the greatest man, he knew also how ubiquitous and how grand God is, and how he too could get a lot from prayer. He too took that time to absorb a lot from the prayer, and also to exert praise towards God. So anyhow, we could spend hours talking about him and how he touches all our lives. So, as I brought before, question 625 on the Spirit's book, what is, right, that model and guide to step on earth? The Spirit's answer, see Jesus. And they keep going on the answer to say that Jesus is the type of the moral perfection to which man may attain upon this earth. So anytime we are wondering, what should we do? Who would know how to behave? Who would know how to act in a better way? We can resort to Jesus. Like, there's so many times throughout our day that we can ask ourselves, what would Jesus do? Jesus, this example, this model, who acted and was faithful to every single divine law. We can ask ourselves, what would Jesus do? And they go on to say that the doctrine taught by him is the purest expression of the divine law. So everything he taught us through his actions and through his words is a great example of all the divine laws being applied. And it's amazing to see how he was always very serene. And one of the reasons was because he was living every single divine law. And as we always talk about here, the divine laws, they are never contradictory to each other. On the contrary, all the divine laws, they build upon each other, creating a harmony, and a harmony that we could see in Jesus, again, because he was living them all. And then he said at the end, many pretended revealers have announced as divine laws what were only human laws, devised by them for serving their own passions and obtaining dominion over the fellow man. So this is where a few of us might have a little issue, to put it in bland words, a little bit of an issue with Jesus, not wanting to believe him, not liking him. And this is usually why. Because many of us in our past lives, and in this lifetime too, we might have used his name to create something that was a divine law, when in turn it was actually us trying to fulfill or trying to serve our own passions, and utilizing the name of Jesus to fulfill our own passions, and most vividly obtaining dominion over our fellow man. And we could see this in the past, we can see this until today. And so it's good for us also to understand why some of us might still feel a little hesitant towards embarking on this journey with Christ. So, because it could be from things from the past. So this knowledge, this reflection, can help us have compassion with all, regardless of their beliefs. And as far as reflecting a little bit about self-love, we can't talk about Jesus without talking about love, and to align with the message that we read at the very beginning, talking about our inner light and the importance of our inner light, we're going to talk about self-love. So, a couple questions. This time of year, how is my self-love? And I'm going to explain why I'm asking this time of year later on. But how's my self-love this time of year? And then, do I truly feel the need to evolve? And do I truly feel my potential to evolve? Do you think I'm capable of evolving? And then, do I feel the love in Jesus' words? So, let us talk a little bit about self-love. And it's a topic that I love talking about because it's something that I'm learning to apply within my life. So, the reason why I bring this to us today is because usually some of us, towards this time of year, start to reflect about what we've done. Right? It's towards the end of the year, and then we start to make lists of resolutions, what I want to do next year, and then we start to reflect about the things that I didn't do this year. And our minds, when our self-love is not developing, our minds tend to look at the things that we didn't do, and tend to look at what others did that we didn't. And we start on this path of comparison, similar to that picture that you see over there. And this can be fairly detrimental to us if we don't cultivate self-love, because it can make us feel bad about ourselves, right? Our self-esteem can be fairly low, and the way that self-love can help us with this, right, is by living in the moment. When we're, for example, at this time, thinking about resolutions for the future, and only worrying about the future, that makes us live in the future. When we're only reflecting about the past and living the past, that makes us stay with the past. And we forget to stay in the now. And what can I do today? What did I learn from the past, and what can I do today so tomorrow is a little different, but always focusing on today, right? And this can help us develop our self-love a lot, because we're living on the now, and the now is what we can't control. When we're living in the future, we're trying to control something that we simply can't. So that will only lead us to be anxious. When we're living in the past, we're usually mourning about the past, like the things that we used to like in the past and we no longer have. So it makes us feel not only sad, but also lose hope in life. So they prevent us from enjoying the today, taking up all these opportunities that God has given us through His mercy to enjoy them, to fully embark on these opportunities and learn from them. Because there's a lot of teachings in the today, in the now, that God is constantly giving to us. But we, most often than not, don't have the sight to see or the ears to listen. And the other point around self-love, especially if we are in a moment at the time where we're not feeling so good about ourselves, is this baby here, this picture of this baby. And I use this sometimes, which can be fairly helpful. If you look at this baby right now, how can you not love him or her? Right? Like when you look at this baby and you see them, you instantly feel love towards that baby. And the reflection that I want to make is that we, all of us, absolutely all of us, were a baby once. So the ability to love a baby can be transferred to loving ourselves. We were once a baby. We were once very lovable, if you will. So what changed? We're still the same person, right? We're still the same spirit in that body. So if we were so lovable 30 years ago, why can't we still be lovable now? Why can't we just love ourselves for who we are, and in that find our light? Emmanuel wrote 2 pages about the importance of finding our light. Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, I believe his first letter to the Corinthians, I think chapter 13, he was talking about love, right? And in that chapter, he wrote amazing things, like an ode to love. And he said, it doesn't matter if we know all the teachings from God. It doesn't matter if we can move mountains. It doesn't matter if we have the gift of the word, of giving speeches. Nothing matters if we don't have love. And in the same way, nothing matters if we don't see that light that we have in ourselves. Right? Emmanuel was very direct in saying we simply cannot evolve without our own light. He actually used the word impossible, and impossible is a pretty direct word, and they usually don't use words like this, but he did. He said, "It is impossible to advance without light." And in this text, he was teaching us how to utilize other people's lights to help us, but to help us find our own. The same way we can utilize Jesus, who has the biggest light around us. We can utilize his life, we can utilize the communion we have with him to find our lights. Not just to feed off his light, but in that to find our own. And another one is what Matthew, again, Jesus said, right? You are the light of the world. Again, Sermon on the Mount. And again, we can see the baby and hopefully get a little closer to understanding that we are the light of the world. That we have a beautiful and amazing light inside all of us. All of us. All of us. We are all sons and daughters of God. And there is a great light inside all of us. When we're not practicing self-love, we tend to hide that light or muffle that light throughout the day, bringing our self-esteem down. So it's a good reminder to utilize these words from Jesus when he told us, you are the light of the world. Very straightforward. You are the light of the world. And we can do a little reflection here. And when we are towards this time of year and we start to reflect again about the things we did and we didn't do, and our self-esteem starts to lower, and we start to think that, oh, I didn't do that enough. I had so many plans for this year and I didn't do it. I didn't have the discipline to keep doing, or to start and progress on a new skill, for example, that I wanted to do. Right? And all these things that we're listing just keeps on chipping away on our self-esteem, right? And then we have on the other side Jesus telling us that we are the light of the world. So who do we think is correct? Us, who's bringing us down, thinking we're not worthy, thinking that we're not good enough. And then on the other side we have Jesus telling us that we are the light of the world. I think we can all bet to say that Jesus was probably right and we are wrong. So having this reflection that we are the light of the world, especially in times when we're feeling down, can help us tremendously. And in that, we start to develop our self-love. And Sonia did a talk about self-love a few months ago. About 2 years ago, I think, we did three talks on self-love as well. So it is a very important virtue that we can look into. And when it comes to us utilizing our light and making change and slowly changing ourselves and evolving ourselves, this always requires three things, and Luis has done a few great talks on will, or willing. He likes to bring a text from the book Thought and Life, where Emmanuel brings us a very logical way of us to think how our mind works, and how our will is what drives us. And so there's these two things that we want to reflect upon, the thinking and the feeling, and how they converge to the willing. And when we're willing to do something, we actually do it, right? For example, if we want to read a book, but instead we pick up our phone and spend an hour on our phone and didn't read the book, why did we do that? Well, it's because our will was not on reading a book. Our will was on looking up something on our phones. So how can we control our will a little bit better so we actually do the things that we know will make us better? And so to do that, we always bring this triangle here at FSS. And this comes from this comes from the Federation, the Spiritist Federation of the state of Mato Grosso. They've developed this line of thinking where we have this triad of self-healing, of thinking, of feeling, and willing. And we've talked about this extensively here. The thinking portion is what we're doing here today. Is what we do when we read. It's what we do when we learn about something. So we're thinking, we're getting the tools that we need to learn about ourselves and to improve. So this is more of the intellect side of things. Then we also have the feeling side of things, which is not so much the intellect, but now on the emotional side. And to feel the divine laws, for example, as we always talk about, is going from the thinking to the feeling. Right? How do we go from thinking, from for example, knowing a divine law to feeling a divine law in our hearts? Well, it is not a process that can be done in a day or a week. It's a process that takes time, and takes a lot of reflection. The reflection is key here for us to think about a divine law and bring it into our feelings. Reflecting about, how does this divine law play a role in my life? Or how does this knowledge that I just learned today, for example, how does this passage in Matthew, you are the light of the world, what does that mean in my life? At what point in my life do I start to feel low? What actions do I do in my life that I start to chip away on my self-esteem? And then we start to think, well, if I bring this passage, if I bring this that Jesus told me, that we are the light of the world, if I bring this into my life, especially in those occasions, I will start to feel that I am the light of the world, and so on and so forth. So this can tremendously help us on the feeling portion. And the feeling portion is the one I want to focus a little bit more on, because it is something that I struggle with. And so there's one key aspect that's fairly important on the feeling, which is self-awareness. And we've done 6 talks on self-awareness this year and last year. It is something that Jesus taught us to do very subtly, but he taught us to do this on the Sermon on the Mount. If you remember that passage on the Sermon on the Mount, when he starts with the Beatitudes, or in Portuguese, the Bem-aventuranças, he always starts with a reflection. It says, blessed are the meek, or blessed are the humble in spirit. So he starts with a reflection. For example, blessed are the poor in spirit. For us to be considered humble in spirit, we got to reflect about ourselves. We got to learn about ourselves. And another passage that he brings to us is in Matthew 11, so a little bit after the Sermon on the Mount, when he said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." And I want to focus on those 2 words. He said, all of you who are weary and burdened. So for us to feel weary and burdened, we ought to reflect. We ought to be self-aware, to feel and understand that we are weary, that we are burdened. And when we realize that, is when we have opened up our hearts to accept his gift, his proposal to give us rest. But you might ask, why? Why do I have to feel weary and burdened so he can give me rest? Well, it's very interesting when we bring the reflection around pride. It's because when we develop our own humility in our hearts, is that we can see that we are not the best person in the world, like our pride tells us to. So in this movement of self-awareness, in this movement of seeing us for who we are, not who we want to be, but who we are today, this is a movement, this is a reflection, this is a construction of humility. And when we construct this humility is when we can see ourselves weary and burdened. And that humility is what opens us up to accept Jesus' help. Somebody who's prideful usually doesn't accept help. But when we're developing our humility, when we have a humbler heart, we can accept help. So that's why he starts, or that's one of the reasons why he starts by saying, you who are weary and burdened. It's because that's the person in that state, he's already humbled his heart and is opening his heart up to accept Jesus' help. And the other piece comes from the good news, where we can look at an example. In chapter 19, talking about the communion with God. And this was a passage where John is talking to Jesus, and John is very anxious in that moment. And he had doubts. John had some doubts, and he was quizzing Jesus, and he was trying to understand a little bit about his anxiety. Why was his heart so anxious? And he asked the Master, he asked Jesus, I've been wanting to understand my commitments with praying. I feel my soul is taken by hesitations. I long for the sincere communion with God. However, the most antagonist ideas oppose my actual desire. So John was a little anxious about the fact that he was praying at time. He was trying to meditate. He was trying to pray. But in that moment, a lot of times, his mind was taking him to places that he didn't like. His mind was, he was feeling a few things that weren't in line with a prayer or weren't in line with a meditation. So he was feeling fairly anxious about that. And Jesus, to teach him a little bit about that, he said, John, all your doubts come from the fact that you have not yet comprehended that each creature has a sanctuary within the Spirit, where the wisdom and love of God manifest through the voices of your own conscience. So if we pay attention to right in the middle here, Jesus said, we have a sanctuary within. Right, this brings us back to what Emmanuel was talking about, the light, that we all have this light. When Jesus was telling us that we are the light of this world, and that we are talking. Awesome. So sorry, yeah, we did have one of our softwares crashed, and now hopefully we're back, and we again are just bringing back that communion with Jesus, bringing back that communion with our sanctuary within, and we're getting close to time here, and I wanted to then close with. I had so much more to talk about Jesus, to be honest, but I wanted to end just like I ended it last year and the year before, with a question around when was Jesus born? And if you probably Google this question, you'll get things saying Jesus was born on the 24th, or sorry, on the 25th. Or you might find people saying that he was born in April, or he was born some other day in the year, so on and so forth. But I wanted to ask all of us, and maybe if you did this reflection last year, you might have an answer this year, is when was Jesus born to you? When was Jesus born to me? And to look at a few examples, if we think about Paul, Jesus was likely born to Paul when he was on his road to Damascus, and he encountered Jesus. He kneeled down, he started crying, and he saw Jesus, and he had this encounter that literally changed his life. So if we were to ask Paul, when was Jesus born? He would have said, on his road to Damascus. To the point that in a letter to the Galatians, he actually said, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. If we were to ask Thomas, again, if we go to the Good News, chapter 16, the testament of Thomas was the one who didn't believe that Jesus was resurrected. So when Jesus resurrected that time, he said, touched by the humbleness of Christ, in tears Thomas rejoices. His soul had overcome a great battle. The heart had triumphed over the brain. The feeling had sharpened his faith. So in that moment when Jesus resurrected and he touched Jesus' wound, probably then was when Jesus was born to Thomas, because he finally believed in him. If, for example, if we were to ask to Francis of Assisi, when was Jesus born to you, Francis? He might say, and this is just a thought, an idea. He might say that Jesus was born to Francis when he was, according to history, when he was kneeling down in front of a cross, and he heard from the cross, Francis, go and repair my house, which, as you can see, is falling into ruins. And in that moment, Francis went on to become a great disciple of Christ. And the other one, Chico Xavier, who most of us from Brazil know him, if you were to ask him, when was Jesus born to you? And there might have been many, many examples throughout his life, but it could be one of the times when he was feeling a little trembled, and Emmanuel, his guide, told him, right, that the key to his success was to look into discipline. But it was done with a lot of love. And Chico went on to apply this every day of his life. So perhaps Jesus was born this time for Chico. And so I want to leave you all with this question: when was Jesus born to you? When was that moment that maybe a switch flicked, and you felt closer to Christ, and you felt his love, and you felt the strength that he can give us, that he can provide us, and then we can feel the faith within him. So, in the words of Jesus, you are the light of the world, and I invite you all not only to reflect upon when did Christ touched you the most, but also reminding that Christ has told every single one of us that we all are the light of this world. So in the words of Emmanuel, let's look for that light. Let's find that sanctuary within, so we can feel the love of God, we can feel the wisdom of God, and be who we're meant to be. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for letting me know that we were having issues with the internet, and I apologize for that. Hopefully it's still streamed everything. And I want to just end in a little prayer. There are no more questions. Great. So closing now our eyes and thinking about Jesus, we can think about being hugged by Jesus, or seeing him and his eyes looking at us with a lot of compassion, with a lot of love. It could be just seeing him walking, whatever it may be. We ask you, Jesus, that we can humble our hearts so we can feel your love, so we can kneel down and ask for your help and accept your help. And especially during this Christmas time, that when we are at Christmas and we have maybe family gatherings or we are at friends' houses, that in that moment when we're sharing a time together, that we don't forget about you. That we also invite you into our homes. And that we can see you coming in through the front door. We can see you sit at a table with us. And we can share a meal, we can share a time with you. Because after all, we're celebrating one of the greatest moments on this earth, when you stepped in and came to show us how great love is, how possible love is, and how we are all the light of this world. So thank you again, Jesus, for being with us. And may we keep feeling you closer and closer to our hearts. So be it. So thank you all for our meeting today. Hopefully it wasn't too distracting with the whole internet issue, but again, it should be hopefully online. If not, next year I'll probably do this talk again, and hopefully we can see each other there. And yeah, have a blessed Sunday, and I hope to see you tomorrow here at 7 online with our talk in Portuguese. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful Sunday.